Hello and welcome. I'm Lee Peterson. I'm the host of WDcast. WDcast is called WDcast because it's brought to you by WD Partners, whose tagline is innovation at scale. And they are at WDpartners.com. So please check it out. And thank you, WD Partners. And thanks, Chris, for sponsoring the show. So normally we'll talk to really smart people, including the guests today. We've talked to before, but we're doing a special series now where we are talking about only one thing, and that is the thing that's on everybody's mind. What happens after this sort of COVID mess that we're in? So today we have with us a special guest, again, second time, thank you very much, Dan Stanek. And Dan is the EVP of Health and Wellness, a super relevant topic. And Dan knows all things about retail and retail consultancy. So welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lee. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and so, why don't we just get it started? And I think, retail in general is a good place to start. Like, what do you think, what's your summary of what's going on, and what do you think is going to come out of the other side of this?
Well, there's still a lot to go. We may be at the early stages, depending on whether there's a second wave. But right now, there's a lot of pent up demand. There's a lot of pent up need. I think people are very anxious to get out, but at the same time, they don't want to be unsafe in that process. So there's this real yin and yang between their wants and their desires and then their rationality. And so I think that they're really struggling to figure out, okay, how often, when, under what conditions. So it's going to be cautious, but I think that there's a lot of pent up demand.
Yeah, I felt that way too. Visited a couple malls last week because Ohio opened up, relatively early, I guess you could say. And I was a little surprised in terms of the retail perspective in malls anyway, where there wasn't that many people. 10, 15 stores were open out of maybe 60, 70. All customers had masks on and that type of thing. So it was a little bit of a tippy-toeing, but inside the stores, it looked very similar, I thought. I mean, they were a little bit more spaced out, if nothing else. But I did not see the pent-upness that I thought that I would. And maybe that has yet to come when, maybe it's more exploratory at first, and then we get into the, bum rush that we all wish that we could achieve right now, right?
Well, I think a mall setting is a lot more discretionary, though. I think that when you go into a general merchandise setting, a home improvement setting, a nursery, other areas, there's going to be a lot more, I think, activity in those areas where malls are very discretionary, and malls were a bit on the decline anyway. So it's kind of definitely something you could put off a lot longer than you can your trip to Walmart.
That's true. The general conversation is every trend that existed in February just got accelerated. And one of those trends was people weren't going to malls that much anymore, and it had a lot to do with the anchors. And to your point, we've talked to, and we work with a couple of people that have been to Home Depot a few times during the shutdown, and they said it was packed every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I have too. And yeah, it was packed. And I mean, they were limiting customers coming in so that they could keep the spacing. But yeah, a lot of demand.
And I just saw as well, in terms of general merchandise, like you mentioned, Walmart had a 10% increase over last year in the quarter, which is phenomenal to have any kind of increase. And they had an 80% increase in online sales. So you have to believe that most of their 10% increase came from online sales. But in the photograph of a Walmart store, which I haven't been to since this started, there was just lines of people. And they all had masks on, and I think the employees did too. But long story short, it's a little bit of a tale of two different cities here, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely this concern, and at the same time, and let's not forget, shopping isn't just about getting stuff. Shopping is a form of entertainment, and we've been cooped up in our homes for a long time. We want to get out, and that's part of being in the agora. It's part of just, being something to do, if you will, when you're not, out hiking or walking or riding your bike or whatever. It's a form of entertainment, as is dining. And so I think there's a lot of pent up demand to do those things.
So your category, your specialty right now, anyway, because you have a long and terrific history throughout retail and consumer behavior, but your specialty right now is health and wellness. How do you see this playing? Because now it's more important than ever, and it just got exploded. Talk about a trend that got accelerated. So where do you see health and wellness playing into retail and restaurants and any consumer behavior going forward?
Well, there are a lot of analogies to what we do, what we've seen in retail, except that healthcare is generally about 15 to 20 years behind retail. And one of the telling signs right now has been telehealth. What we've seen during this crisis is telehealth has absolutely come to the forefront. Any need, any concern that you've had to go through telehealth. So you had to adopt it. And so many customers I call them customers. The healthcare industry calls them patients. But many of those consumers are experiencing telehealth for the first time. And plenty of them are going to say, well, that wasn't too bad. I'm going to do that next time. And some of them are going to ask, well, why have we been doing it the old way all this time? Why do I need to go into the doctor's office to answer 5 questions? Why can't I just answer those 5 questions online? But at the same time, they're also going to say that, hey, there are some things you can't do in telehealth. Unlike with e-commerce, where you can buy just about anything online, you cannot get a full exam online. There are things that are going to happen. So you're going to have to go to see somebody at some point for some conditions. And I think there's going to be a lot of concern about doing that in the hospital environment. If there's one thing this has done, it's put a lot of focus on what's happening in the hospital. And there was already a movement away from the hospital as the place to do healthcare, and a movement toward outpatient facilities and things that are more like retail, that are closer to home, closer to work, closer to where you live, work, and play. And that's going to get accelerated as well.
Well, it brings up an interesting point, because you could almost foresee, and let me know what you think about this, like an integration of healthcare into public spaces or, areas that the public goes. Like they're talking about, well, if we're going to have a baseball game, we're going to test everybody that comes in the stadium. We're going to definitely have to test all the players. But could you see that type of thing in say, a shopping center or a shopping environment? Or do you think the retailers or grocers or people like that will take that upon themselves?
They are. In terms of testing is going to be a huge component here, both on what they call diagnostic testing, which is, do you have a virus? And then there's also the antibody testing, which is, okay, have you had it already, and are you potentially immune? So those are both going to be testing procedures, and retailers have already stepped up to the plate to say, hey, yeah, we want to be a part of this. CVS is very active in this. Walgreens, Walmart, those are all chains that have said, and Kroger, those are all chains that have said, hey, we want to be active in this, using either parking lot space or remote areas, but they're very active in it. They've got scale. They've got thousands of locations, so they can reach lots of people in a very accessible way, and that makes it convenient for people to have those ongoing tests.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because if you think about it, you could have CVS stations at every shopping center. I mean, just to make, if nothing else, even if it's temperature checks or some basic things that are sort of rudimentary at the entrance of every shopping center.
Yeah, absolutely.
Create more of a comfort thing. And I think that was, could be one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot more tippy toe into places like shopping center, where there's an aggregate of humanity. and you're like, okay, how close do I get to these people, or what do I do? But if there was temperature checks and everybody got checked in some way or form, it would kind of grease the skids, if you think.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you make of the explosion of grocery? I read where there was, because of all the hoarding, there was, one of these charts that go like this, like grocery
Hmm.
exploded. And of course, we all know this because we went out and tried to find simple things and couldn't find them. But now it's leveled off a little bit. But they were definitely the canary in the coal mine for this whole thing, don't you think?
Oh, totally. And what's really interesting is that before this all happened, what we've been seeing with many grocery purchases is that there have been many more frequent trips and smaller baskets. And then during this crisis, what we saw is that there was a huge spike of stock up behavior. So the hoarding, if you will. And so
Yeah.
a lot of stock up behavior, and that really filled your pantry. But even now, as things have stabilized, there's still now fewer trips and larger baskets, and that is something that we saw in the past, and that is likely going to be something that we're going to see more of. Is the elimination of the frequency of trips, and a little bit more bundling of your needs into fewer trips.
So you think that they're also going to take health and wellness upon themselves, right?
Yeah, I think that consumers are going to be a little bit more cognizant. This whole thing is going to. There were germaphobes before this all started, and there are going to be more germaphobes. I don't think that it's going to. I don't think everybody's going to be a germaphobe, but there are going to be a higher percentage. If it was 10% before, it's going to be 15% now. But so there are going to be, there are going to be people who are very, very concerned about anything touching, anything breathing, and but for many people, they're going to be just cautious about, okay, is it necessary? Am I willing to trade off a touch or a seeing for something that I desire? I think that if it's unnecessary, then I'm not going to put up with it. So one of those areas is some of the service areas in a grocery, the deli area. Do I need to have somebody cut my meat at that stage, or can that be done in a more processed way, and I can just grab a package and take it and put it in my cart? That's a trade-off I might be willing to make, and in fact, people are making that trade-off. It'll be interesting to see whether that carries over into things like produce, where there's a lot of desire to see and touch the merchandise.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think because they were canaries in a coal mine, and also people, consumers are used to shopping now at grocery. To your point, more frequent trips, and we've all been there. And in some cases, it was like the only chance to get out of the house and go someplace where you're basically comfort. But to the to the meaning of a canary in a coal mine. So now we know, like, that's a safe place almost.
Mm-hmm.
You agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it has some elements of safety, because people are going to be, chains are responding with a lot of safety elements. They know that there has been concern, and they're responding well. But at the same time, there is a lot of congregation in a limited area,
Yeah.
and there is a lot of touching of things. So I think that it will remain an area of concern, and they're going to have to be cognizant of the necessity of touching and where it provides value. And I also think that this opens a door for other farm markets and local providers who don't have the crowds, the throngs. There's still the touching, and probably more so, really, but you've got fewer people that are congregated in those areas.
And outdoors,
And
which
outdoors.
which can make a big difference. Which brings up another thing. Speaking of outdoors, is buy online, pick up at the store. And again,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about trends accelerating, but we saw in some of our studies 5 and 6 years ago that that was a really important thing for consumers a long time ago. If they could just pull up to a store and you could come out to the trunk and put in their merchandise, they would shop at a store more often if that could just happen. And I think it was taken lightly, by every form of retailer, including grocery, for the longest time. But now It's a lot less of a nice to have and a lot more of a must have.
Absolutely. And at the same time, I don't know that the industry put its best foot forward in that area, because there, many people were doing it for the first time. And this is a bad time to do it for the first time, because the experiences were rushed. You didn't have all the inventory. The pickers were doing their best job, but boy, they had to make a lot of substitutions. And you get home and you're like, wow, this is not what I ordered. And it can be frustrating. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those people do come back and whether they view it as a good experience. But it's also, what it also did very importantly is it got people to download the apps and to utilize the apps.
Yeah.
And that is a huge issue from a relationship with the customer and a relationship to the data. So now when they're present in the parking lot, when the geolocation services are able to kick in. The apps can provide a lot of power to those retailers going forward. And I think, once you put your credit card into the system, now you're part of their ecosystem. Now how many various providers are you going to give your credit card information to? So it's locking you in a little bit to the ecosystem, whether it's Walmart, whether it's Amazon, whether it's, Instacart. It'll be interesting to see whether that promotes loyalty.
Well, I think the apps thing is a really, really good point, Dan, because in talking to retailers and restaurateurs before this all happened, they couldn't, conversion to the app, they couldn't get it to happen. And people, by the end of 2019, had so many apps on their phones, they didn't want to download somebody else's app. But now it's absolutely necessary. And one of the things that happens with that is contactless checkout too, right? So now, I can just check out, or I can send a payment, or I can just, hold up my phone, it gets scanned. I'm not touching anything or anybody other than the product, which we know is fairly safe. So that's another leap, like the technology aspect of this, like really coming into play, also got accelerated like quite a bit.
Big time.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody from Alibaba last week, and they were talking about they had a department store where they were live streaming 200 times a day, and subsequently increased their foot traffic by 50%.
Wow.
Because they were live streaming makeup, they were live streaming trying on clothes, they were live streaming the latest display that they put up. And if you think about it, because of shortened hours, they were doing it about every 10 minutes and just pushing stuff out.
And I think that's an important aspect, is not just, how do we utilize technology to enhance the procurement of merchandise, but how do we use it to replicate some of the things that people love about shopping and getting expert opinion and expert consultation, being able to get information in the beauty industry, being able to try on or being able to get advice and counsel on color and et cetera. So there's a lot of other ways that technology is going to need to support that beyond just picking up merchandise.
Yeah, and that's something I think we both see at the other side of this, right? That like innovative ways to get people in stores. And I was telling somebody about the Alibaba thing, and they were like, yeah, but who's going to sit there and look at live streaming all day? And I'm like, dude, you're 48 years old. So
who would watch people play video games? Oh, Twitch.
Who would play video games till 4:30 in the morning when they don't have school anymore? I don't know. Not me.
Exactly.
Anyway, so the great conversation. What do you think 2021 is gonna look like? Because it's sort of obvious the whole thing is happening a little bit more in slow motion than we predicted, because cases are still on the rise, in the rest of the United States, not necessarily in New York. So it's probably not going to stop and could even come back, towards the end of the year. So it's really going to be 2021, I think, before we start to be normal. So what do you think in a nutshell? What's your word for the day for 2021?
Well, you know me. You know I'm a bit of a natural optimist, and I believe a lot in the ingenuity of our people, and I think that there are going to be some breakthroughs in this personally, and I think that we're going to be in better off than many predictions. So if you take the optimistic viewpoint, I think 2021 is going to be a rebound. People have been very hurt economically, so I think that there is going to be a period of time that there's, it's going to be a makeup period where people are going to be very, very cautious in their spending, very, very cautious in the way that they act. But I do think that things will be rebounding. So I'd say rebound would be the 2021 mantra.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna put it up on my wall here. I think. Yeah, I have a tendency to agree. And one of the things I think we forget about, because anybody who's been alive here for the last 30 or 40 years has been through like 6 recessions. And the biggest difference with this one is, if everything starts to come back, we have a lot of people that are unemployed. That's true, but a lot will come back.
Exactly.
Like really fast. Like, okay, well, now we need you. We're opening. So many retailers closed, or everybody closed, like stores, and now Amazon and Walmart and all these guys are going crazy, and they're hiring hundreds of thousands of people. It's just going to look like a completely different economy, I think, in 2021, and I think that would be my word, different.
Exactly, and unfortunately, I think it's
different.
It's going to expand the have not type of issues that we've had as to struggle with as an economy. And I think that the have-nots are going to be very, very cautious and very, difficult to get back into the mainstream. But at the same time, the haves are going to have a lot of pent-up demand. I think that there's going to be a huge rush of purchasing on the haves. The markets ultimately, I believe, will rebound, and I think that will promote confidence in one's 401k or in their portfolio at the have level. So I think this have and have not issue is going to be a big one, but I think that they'll balance each other out, and on the whole, will be okay, not great.
Yeah, well, that's a huge macro issue, I think. And, it'd be interesting. I think one of the most interesting things this year is going to see, we'll find out if the have-nots actually make it to the voting booth, because that's always been an issue. They just don't necessarily. And this year, because they've been more affected than I think anybody, we'll see if they really want change. If not, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
well, just a final question. How are you doing? Like, how's everything in the Stanek household?
It's good. It's good. I've got a pretty good work situation. I've got a good office situation set up at home, so I've been able to be productive and do things well. I've got my son here with me. My other son lives a block away, and he keeps his distance, but he's at least able to come by and see me from 6 feet. so that's nice. I don't have a lot of time with my girlfriend, which has been a casualty because of the social. Yeah, we've got 2 different households, so that's been a struggle. But from a health standpoint, I have not had a lot of contact with I don't even know many people who have had any issues with the virus in their families. I think we're fortunate that we're in a state that really has not had the kind of explosion of cases and casualties as other states have.
That we know of.
That we know of, yeah. So it's I think that and that's another thing that I think enters into the consumer's mind. If you've had a lot of direct exposure to people that I think that creates a lot more concern. If you don't, then it stays a little bit invisible. And I wonder whether we're going to see that in various regions, whether we're going to see regions really responding differently in terms of the consumer comeback.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of legitimate points about that. Like, yeah, New York City shouldn't open.
Yeah.
But when you go into upstate New York and Seneca and like all these places like that have had very little exposure, it's going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that until I think we slowly get back to normal. And thankfully, New York City seems to be doing a lot better as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Dan, thank you very much. You've been very gracious, and thanks for making WDcast a little bit better twice.
Absolutely. Pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and people be sure and listen to the next WDcast. We're going to hopefully see what's on. We'll have a lot more experience with the other side of this. And so we're going to continue to talk to experts, including a couple coming up that are going to be fantastic. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, which is, if you go to wdpartners.com and you just click on a hamburger at the very bottom of the hamburger, when it opens up, is a little icon, like a podcast icon. Just click on it. You can look at several other leaders that we've talked to and also sign up. So appreciate it very much. Thanks for listening. And remember, I'm going to give you a Michael Jordan reference. If you never take the shot, then you're never going to win. So keep that in mind. Stay frosty out there, and talk to you next time.